Have you ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Today, we will dive into one of the most fascinating and profound stories of humanity, the saga of Job. Imagine losing everything you love and still maintaining unwavering faith. This is not just an ancient narrative, it's a journey of discovering the mysteries of Job, a man who faced unimaginable trials and remained steadfast. Stay with us and see how this millennia-old story still resonates powerfully in our lives today. In this incredible biblical narrative from the book of Job, we meet a wealthy man named Job who lived in the region of Uz. He had a large family and possessed immense flocks. Job was a man of integrity and justice, dedicated to living a moral life and maintaining a very close and disciplined relationship with God. In the land of Uz, there lived a man named Job. He was blameless and upright, feared God, and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and many servants. Job was considered the greatest of all the people of the East. Job's sons often held feasts in their homes on their birthdays and invited their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. After each period of celebration, Job would perform a purification ritual for them. Early in the morning, he would offer a burnt sacrifice for each one, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular practice, as described in the first chapter, verses 1 to 5. God highlighted Job's virtues to Satan, but Satan argued that Job was faithful only because God abundantly favored him. One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, a man who is blameless and upright, fears God, and shuns evil." Satan replied, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land." These dialogues between God and Satan are narrated in the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 6 to 10. Satan challenged God, saying that if allowed to inflict suffering on Job, he would change and curse God. God permitted Satan to torment Job to test this bold claim, but prohibited him from taking Job's life. "But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face," said the Lord to Satan. "Very well, then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. These events are described in the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. Job received 4 messages in one day, informing him that his sheep, servants, and 10 children had died, victims of raiders, thieves, or natural disasters. While Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." These tragic events are described in the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 13 to 19. In his mourning, Job tore his robe and shaved his head, but still praised God in his prayers. Job declared, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. This response of Job is found in the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 20 to 22. Satan appeared in heaven again, and God gave him another opportunity to test Job. This time, Job suffered from painful sores on his skin. Job's wife tried to persuade him to curse God and give up on life, but he resisted and endured his sufferings. 2 plots are skillfully intertwined, one celestial and one terrestrial, and the events on earth are the result of something that had already occurred in heaven. Just as a battle on earth immediately follows a conflict in heaven, as in the book of Revelation, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, 3 friends of Job, arrive to console him, sitting with him in silence for 7 days out of respect for his mourning. On the 7th day, Job speaks, initiating a dialogue where each of the 4 men offers their reflections on suffering. Job curses the day of his birth, comparing life and death to light and darkness. He wishes he had never been born and that his birth was shrouded in darkness, feeling that life only increases his agony. Eliphaz responds by saying that Job, who previously comforted others, now admits he never truly understood their suffering. Eliphaz concludes that Job's pain must be due to some sin he committed and recommends that Job seek God's favor. Bildad and Zophar agree, stating that Job must have done something wrong to provoke God's justice, and suggest he demonstrate more innocent behavior. Bildad supposes that Job's children brought death upon themselves, while Zophar insinuates that whatever wrong Job may have committed deserved an even greater punishment than he received. Job reacts angrily to these comments, calling his friends useless physicians who disguise their help with lies, as described in the book of Job, chapter 13, verses 1-4. My ears have heard and understood this. What you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you, but I desire to speak to the Almighty and to argue my case with God. However, you smear me with lies. You are all worthless physicians. Job questions why God judges people based on their actions when he could easily correct or forgive those acts. Job is perplexed as to how a human being can fully satisfy God's justice, given that God's ways are mysterious and beyond human comprehension. Furthermore, humans cannot persuade God with their words. God cannot be deceived, and Job admits that he doesn't even know himself well enough to defend his case before God. Job longs for a mediator between him and God so that he is not condemned to Sheol, the underworld. Job believes that in heaven there is a witness, the Redeemer, who will vouch for his integrity, as expressed in chapter 19, verse 25. I know that my Redeemer lives and that in the end he will stand on the earth, and in chapter 16, verse 19, even now my witness is in heaven, my advocate is on high. The suffering becomes unbearable for Job, who becomes bitter, anxious, and fearful. He laments the injustice of God allowing evil people to prosper while he and many other honest people suffer. Job wants to confront God and protest, but he cannot find him physically. He thinks wisdom is hidden from humanity but resolves to pursue it by fearing God and shunning evil. Eventually, God intervenes in the divine dialogue of the first round. During his speeches, Job asked God 36 times to speak with him. Now his wish is granted. In the 2 instances where God speaks to Job, it happens in the midst of a storm. There is a certain humor in the way God addresses him. Job is reminded by God that he is the creator of everything. God goes over his impressive work of creating and sustaining the world, questioning Job if he could match that work. He ends by questioning whether Job is in a position to judge, saying it is presumptuous for Job to believe God should explain himself to him. Job is made to feel very small. Eventually, Job responds, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer, twice, but I will say no more. In the second round, God does not speak about himself as creator but about 2 of his creatures. The speech is full of humor. Once again, he asks Job about his thoughts on the hippopotamus, the behemoth, and the crocodile, the leviathan, as if these incredible beasts held the answers to life's great problems. Job is reminded that he cannot understand God, nor the animal world, much less the moral world. God's main point is, why are you trying to argue with me? Job responds that God is omniscient and that no plan of his can be thwarted. He now realizes that his questioning of God was completely inappropriate and despises himself and repents in dust and ashes. Although the encounter with God is humiliating for Job, the core of Job's problem is addressed as he reconnects with God. The dialogue provides a magnificent and unexpected climax to the book. In the epilogue, the text shifts from poetry to prose. When Job accepts that he should not blame God for his interactions with him, God restores Job's children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, properties, camels, and flocks of sheep, making him much richer and happier than before. As God's servant, Job is rehabilitated. The 3 friends of Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, are harshly reprimanded by God, who states that they did not speak rightly about Job. God warns against quoting their speeches as absolute truths. Interestingly, in the 2 instances where God speaks to Job, he does not directly answer Job's questions, nor does he mention the bet made with Satan. Job was likely unaware of the heavenly dispute, as God had his own reasons for allowing Job's suffering. It is important to note the difference between the Jewish and Christian understandings of this book. Jews of the Old Testament era believed that God's justice should be evident in this life, as everyone, good or evil, ended up in Sheol, a shadowy place where spirits rest. Christians, on the other hand, have a different perspective on suffering, considering the view of eternal life in light of Christ's work. The suffering in this world pales in comparison to the life that awaits in heaven. Thus, there are only subtle hints of the afterlife throughout the book of Job. At one point, Job expresses a desire to meet God after his death, but this is not a recurring theme in the book. The book of Job has two main plots, the divine and the earthly. The book begins with the heavenly plot, where God meets with Satan in heaven. Satan, an angel whose role was to report sins, did not believe that anyone could love God for who he is and not just for the blessings received. This leads to a bet between God and Satan, where Satan argues that if God were to take away Job's blessings, he would curse God like any other. This encounter teaches us that Satan is not omnipresent like God. The earthly plot, the debate between Job and his friends, occupies most of the book. The central question is why Job is suffering more than others. His friends believe that Job's suffering is the result of some sin, while Job maintains his innocence. The suspense is kept, as the reader knows Job is right. The book's dual plot structure reminds us that no one has the complete picture when it comes to understanding suffering. Job's greatest suffering was spiritual, feeling distant from God. When Job finally gets the chance to speak with God, he is humbled, but this experience reconnects him with God. For Christians, the book of Job can be seen in the context of the New Testament, where Jesus' crucifixion was also not explained by God, suggesting that even the Son of God lost understanding of the purpose of his suffering under the intensity of the crucifixion. Christians believe that life continues beyond death and that divine justice will be administered to all in a final judgment. This summary of the book of Job shows us a journey of faith, suffering, and redemption that challenges our understanding and deeply touches the soul. If this story inspired or made you reflect, there is much more to discover. Keep exploring these fascinating stories, and remember, no matter how difficult the journey, you are never alone. May God accompany and illuminate you in every step.